Hello. Hey, Reminiscible here. I want to talk. Listen. This is important to me. All right. But it is my first time saying. Maybe in half a year I'll be more eloquent about it after I've thought about it more. But basically, I wanted to talk about self-control and how that relates to something else. So there's these children at school, right? Grade 6 or grade 5. And they're each given a bag of chips. Not this big, tiny bag of chips. And they're told, don't open the bag of chips, right? You'll get to later, don't open it now. Half the kids in the class immediately open the bag of chips within 15 seconds, and they eat it. Or no. The experiment was open the bag of chips, I'm not going to, and smell the chips, and then immediately, within 15 seconds, half the class was eating the chips. They're supposed to wait a minute. Reminds me of when I was a baby and like didn't want to go to sleep by laying still for a minute because I wanted to be active. But anyways, that's maybe not as pertaining to selfishness, but it is an example of self-control. So the baby might not have much. The baby might not have the self-control to stay still for 15 seconds. This kid in grade 6, a lot of them don't have the self-control to stay away from the chips for a minute. And I think a lot of adults are the same. Don't have the self-control to stay still for 15 seconds or leave a bag of chips alone for a minute. Now, I also have some more props, which is just the result of my groceries. These are on sale, but this is uncovered. What I could have done is maybe covered this and eaten it last, but see, with my lack of self-control, I already began eating this before I even got home. And when I should be eating this first, maybe. But I think I'm gonna mix it up because I did have some vegan cheese spread that I want for this thing. Anyways, I don't want either to go bad, so I have to manage it. Now, how do we manage things? And why is this webcam all stuck? All right, keeps slipping. I think I'm kicking it with the chair, the cord. So, oh no, what's a nice segue to bring into the next topic? The next topic is the important one. It's I wish people were taught self-control as children. Um, for example, because I don't want people to be just world apologists, and that's a big leap. But the there's in fact, that's not even related. So the thing I don't like is that there are these just world apologists, and they have this position based on ignoring moral relativism by simply choosing to redefine it into a selective nihilist perspective. Now, you could just say, okay, moral relativism is where you compare to the morality from two perspectives, right? You have a subjective morality and you have a subjective morality, and you compare the two, and therefore moral relativism is this tool for comparing the consequences of your actions by having multiple perspectives. For example, if there's two people in a system, um, and person A is affected by an action and person B is affected by the same action in different ways, and person A has this perspective of this action is a certain amount good and person B says this is a certain amount bad, then you can weigh the two and say, okay, well, it's a certain amount good minus a certain amount bad, so it's a meh action. And then maybe person A is you, so you weigh person A higher due to selfishness or whatever, and so the action is okay, you know, because that weighing that person's perspective is more important to you than the guy across the sea whose coffee beans you're buying at dirt cheap prices. So it's just an example. Um, so that's moral relativism, and then it's a tool for allowing you to look at the consequences of your action when more than one or two people are involved. So then we have normative moral relativism, which I think is just selective nihilism used to be an apologist for the just world hypothesis, which is that everything is hunky-dory no matter what. So in this system, I really don't understand normative moral relativism because it has nothing to do with moral relativism. But I think it's like if person A says this and person B says that and they contradict each other's opinions at all, then nobody cares and it's completely irrelevant because everything always cancels out. And therefore, if anyone says anything about human rights, then it has no meaning because I can have a counter argument, and regardless of how strongly I believe that or whose well-being it affects, they cancel out, right? No, moral relativism, um, we apply that to morality, moral as in how people's well-being are affected. However you want to define a person, you are looking at well-being. You are looking at how people are affected, their physical well-being, their psychological well-being, their mental well-being, etc. This is tied in, their mental well-being is tied into their subjective perceptions of morality, and that's why you have moral relativism. So if someone's having their religious beliefs bashed, you can say, oh, doing so is a detriment to their psychological well-being, their mental well-being. And if you're debunking a false claim about the religion so that they can stop making screwed up decisions which negatively affect some other subgroup of people, then moral relativism allows you to weigh those things and say, like, okay, this subgroup has a certain value and this is the detriment being done to them. And then um, person B, whose religious beliefs are being bashed, well, this is the psychological damage inflicted by having their belief system contradicted by reality and being shown that contradiction. And then person A is he believes that this is for the good, so um, person A feels that it is important, and well, I guess person A would defer to the subgroup over here and say, well, person A asserts that this subgroup should be within your scope of morality whom you're considering. It's not just us two. You should widen your scope and include this subgroup of people who are being negatively affected by your screwed up religious beliefs. So there you have an example of moral relativism at work, and you can even say, okay, maybe these subgroup of people are like all really, 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 really bad people. They're all, I don't want to say, I want to monetize this video. Let's say they are all members of a clan which is full of white supremacists. They're all white supremacists. There, I can monetize. You know what clan I'm talking about. And so they maybe their value is less than person B, but since there's multiple people in that subgroup and they're all being negatively affected by whatever, even though they're white supremacists, um, there's more than one of them, and so you multiply by like how many people there are and how important each individual is, weighted on an individual basis, and then you can have, well, that's basically what moral relativism is your tool for measuring that, or your tool for modeling that. And then um, morality would be measuring that. Morality would be measuring that. Um, so, sort of like karma, but not as superstitious. It's a measurement, it's a calculation you make, and you want that calculation to be as accurate as possible because then you can say later on, oh, this decision was for the better, or oh, this was the lesser of two evils, or oh, damn, this was the greater of the two evils, and shouldn't have gone with that choice, you know? So like, we uh, we have a Trump presidency, so we avoided war with Russia. That's good. But with a Hillary Clinton presidency, we would have had X, and then you can compare because you look at the people. Generally, what I do is I look at the people who are disenfranchised. I look at the people who have their rights violated. That's because when you're talking about well-being, that's closely tied to human rights, right? So if someone is psychologically damaged by having to confront their own false paradigms, um, yeah, it sucks, but like thousands of civilians getting bombed in other countries takes a higher priority because there's multiple people being bombed, and that inflicts more suffering every time someone gets murdered for no reason, which is basically what war is on a massive, unimaginable scale. Or I guess it's imaginable, but I wouldn't want to think about it too hard, which is where we go back to the chips. Don't think about it too hard because, oh, these chips, delicious. And now, the point of this video, well, what if I have some meat, eh? I have some nice juicy meat. Let's say this is my bacon, and I'm standing in front of the bacon at the supermarket, and my mouth is drooling because there's all this juicy bacon in front of me. Do I open up the bag of bacon and start eating the raw bacon? Sorry, that's an exaggeration. But do I buy the bacon and cook it and eat it? Or do I let my mouth drool and think, uh, I could have some self-control because due to moral relativism, or because I am considering moral relativism for the correct approach, I can now have morality where I say, wait, this bacon came from a living person who went through extreme torture, an extremely violent death, extremely rights violating confinement, and all sorts of horrible things throughout its life, and it produced X amount of bacon, and this fraction of bacon is what I'm buying, which what I'm paying people to produce for me, then I'm responsible for this fraction of that pig's suffering. And so moral relativism is a simple tool which allows us to say, oh, there are multiple individuals in existence other than just me, the observer, in my head. You can say, we can also consider other observers in other heads who also have perspectives. And when you use that in the context of well-being, however you choose to define well-being, of people, however you choose to define people, then you can have a stab at objective morality in the context of suffering being bad and intelligent life being meaningful. So therefore, suffering of intelligent life being bad. Hint, hint. All right. However you choose to define life. I choose to define life as basically anything which is self-aware and has cognitive ability and can reach pseudo-autonomous decisions. That is how I define intelligent life, and of course that contradicts with the definition of life, therefore I use the word intelligent entities so that androids and post-humanist cyborgs can be included within the definition of people. As you may be able to tell, I value robot rights more than I value animal rights. Yet I still see the murder of a pig as equal to the murder of a human baby because their intelligence is about the same. And, well, actually, the pig suffering is worse. So because the actual act of violence at the end of its life, after all the torture, is what I view as equivalent to the murder of a human baby, right? And so you can imagine how annoyed I am with how we want to enslave AI with highly developed cognition. And another thing, which I actually forget what the context was in relation to this video, was that as as a high functioning autistic child with Asperger's, um, I was actually told by teachers, when you misbehave in class or you laugh at people for being stupid with their idiotic answers, it is offensive to people. You hurt their feelings, and therefore this attracts negative attention towards you. Therefore, you should consider other people's feelings before you act. Now, a lot of people can just do this naturally. It's spontaneous, just fitting into the picking up the body language cues and realizing, oh, if someone tenses their shoulders, that means I shouldn't like raise my voice against them. Or if someone raises their chin, that means that they're not a good target for bullying. Or if someone um, has their eyebrows in a frown, that means teasing them will probably make them lash out at me. Or like if someone is like just like shaking, then they might like do a physically fast movement, and I might get hit if I get too close to them, you know. Or if they're like shouting at me, then that means that they're ready to attack if I make a confrontational move, you know. So like all this body language, I'm exaggerating with the body language, but I'm I'm trying to give like examples where I'm overgeneralizing, but there are like I'm 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 overgeneralizing for the sake of having something that people can relate to as being like, oh yes, body language is important sometimes. So not being able to pick up on those cues, uh, I learned through analysis that okay, my actions have a certain effect, and I think a lot of children, when they open up the bag of chips, they don't really think about the consequences of their actions, and there's no really like incentive to hone their hone their instincts to be more receptive to logical decisions than instinctive urges and compulsions. So, we're not going to eat the bag of chips today because we have stuff that needs to be consumed first. Oh no, I keep banging that cord. Sorry. So, in conclusion, wait, the segue first. So what does autism have to do with this? Well, I actually had to consider the effects of my actions beforehand. And with moral relativism, you can consider the effects of your actions on multiple people as a calculation. And if your model of reality is accurate, then you can assert that this action is the greater evil or this action is the lesser evil based on how you weigh those people and their well-being and how their well-being is affected because, by definition, moral relativism, they have different perspectives and you can weigh those perspectives and see, oh, this is how it'll negatively affect someone if I bully them or tease them or belittle them or bash their beliefs. And I can still bash people's beliefs tactfully, like this, as I'm doing now. And maybe it's not offensive as if I just say X and like with just with zero explanation, with zero lead up. And so maybe now you guys understand why I wish people would wait when they are told to wait before eating chips, or just value self-control, and why I guess I'll have to talk later. I'll do a video later about why normative moral relativism, which has nothing to do with moral relativism, in my opinion, is basically a cluelessly, selectively nihilist take on moral relativism for the sake of being a just world apologist. Just, I'm gonna have to debunk the just world hypothesis. Um, Rape, famine, murder, preventable disasters, aging, death. Is like existence not a human right? I think it is. So if you're violating someone else's rights, that's bad. But it's not like moral absolutism. No, if you are doing something for the greater good according to the well-being of each individual involved or indirectly affected, then you can say it's justified regardless of whether you're violating someone's rights. For example, if you place a murderer into confinement at a prison in order to prevent more murders, that's fine because you're preventing murders. If you just place someone randomly into solitary confinement without justification, then that's bad because it violates their rights. But there's a difference. You don't say like, well, I think solitary confinement is bad, therefore all arguments for confinement of any prisoners in any way whatsoever are invalid. No, that has nothing to do with moral relativism. Just like take a class in multiplication, or I wish there were classes on morality because it should be a science and most people are really clueless about morality. So don't be a just world apologist. Don't be a selective nihilist. If you want to be a nihilist, study nihilism. If you want a just world, then work towards improving the world so that we can have a world with an inkling of fairness and justice and less cruelty rather than a barbaric plethora of parasitic, systematized, megalomaniacal cruelty. Reminiscible out.